There's a moment many of us reach, often sometime after retirement, once the house quiets down and the routines become simpler, when we start to ask ourselves a question that sounds simple, but feels anything but. Would it be better if I lived closer to the kids? And I understand why that question comes up. Maybe your daughter just had her third child and you'd like to help her more. Maybe your son keeps urging you to move closer, saying it would make things easier. Maybe the house feels a little too quiet these days, or the holidays are beginning to feel a little emptier than they used to. It all sounds reasonable, doesn't it? After all, what could be more natural than wanting to be near your family? Especially the children you raised, who are now raising children of their own. But here's something I want to say gently, with no judgment, only experience. What sounds comforting on the surface may, in truth, be one of the hardest, most disappointing decisions you ever make. Not because your children are unkind, not because they don't love you, but because life has changed. And the way families function today is not the way they did when we were raising our own kids. There are things we don't always see coming, not until it's too late. When we decide to move closer to our adult children, we often imagine scenes that feel warm and familiar. Dinners together on Sundays, picking up the grandkids from school, maybe even just popping in for coffee on a rainy afternoon. We imagine being needed, being appreciated, and most of all, being connected. But reality, more often than not, has other plans. And if you've made that move, or even if you're still only thinking about it, you might already sense the subtle shift. The long pauses between texts, the way your presence is appreciated, but only in very particular doses. The schedules, the walls, the slow creeping feeling that you are nearby, but not truly with them. Now, let me be clear. This is not about placing blame. It's about telling the truth. The kind of truth that only reveals itself after a few seasons of trying to make something work that, deep down, never had the foundation to thrive the way you hoped it would. You see, there's something we rarely talk about as we grow older. How easy it is to confuse physical closeness with emotional connection. We think that if we're just a short drive away, the relationship will naturally deepen. But proximity isn't love. Being nearby doesn't always mean being included. In fact, sometimes it makes you easier to take for granted. I knew a man, let's call him George, who sold his house in Montana to be nearer to his daughter in Arizona. She was a single mom with 2 kids, working full-time, and he wanted to be there for her. He imagined himself helping out with school pickups, cheering at soccer games, being the strong, steady hand his grandkids could rely on. And for the first few weeks, it did feel like that. But then life took over. His daughter was busy, the grandkids were overscheduled, and George found himself sitting in his apartment, looking out at the same cactus-filled view, waiting for the phone to ring. It rang less and less. It's not that they stopped loving him. It's that his presence became background noise. You can't fault people for getting caught up in their lives. But you can. Gently, quietly. Start to feel like you're intruding. You start to measure your steps. You wait for invitations. You become hesitant, cautious, careful not to be too much. And that, right there, is where something begins to break. When we lived farther away, our presence had value. A visit was an event. A phone call carried intention. Our role was clearly defined and, most importantly, respected. But when we place ourselves at the edge of their world, hoping to be pulled into the center, we often find ourselves orbiting, not belonging. And that hurts. But we rarely say it out loud. We tell ourselves it's fine. We say we're just glad to be near. We busy ourselves with little things, volunteering, gardening, walking the dog. But deep down, something aches. Because the truth is, we made that move out of love. And we hoped, maybe, to feel it returned more fully than we do. Now, I know there are those who say, but isn't family the most important thing? And yes, in many ways it is. But being part of a family doesn't mean forfeiting your own life, your own needs, your own space to breathe. Because when you make yourself too available, you stop being seen as someone to cherish and instead become someone to manage. It's a hard pill to swallow, but I've seen it again and again. Seniors, good people, who uprooted everything to be close to their adult children, only to find themselves lonelier than they were before. Because now, there's no going back. The old house is sold. The friends are far away. The routines are broken. And you're left in a new place that doesn't quite feel like home. And with people who are too busy to truly make room for you. Let's not kid ourselves. We are in a stage of life where peace matters more than ever. Dignity, autonomy, having a space that is truly ours, with people who see us not as a burden or an obligation, but as a full person. Someone who still has thoughts, dreams, humor, ideas, stories. Someone who doesn't need to prove their worth to be included in the rhythm of someone else's life. It's not about bitterness. It's about clarity. Now, you might be thinking, but my kids asked me to come. And maybe they did. But even that can come with strings we don't always notice at first. Sometimes, what they really need is help with childcare, or someone to drive them to appointments, or simply to know you're nearby in case of emergency. But ask yourself, are they inviting you to be part of their lives, or to be a support system? There's a big difference. You're allowed to ask more. You're allowed to want more. You are allowed to say, my life still matters. Not in a dramatic way, not to make anyone feel guilty, but as a quiet promise to yourself. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Only you can decide what feels right for you. But what I can say is this. Before you make that move, or if you already have, take a moment to ask yourself, what do I need truly to feel at peace? Because love, real love, does not depend on zip codes. You are still allowed to build a life that's yours, with friends who drop by unexpectedly, with neighbors who wave from across the fence, with routines that are simple, comforting, and yours alone. And if your children truly want you close, not for convenience, but for connection, they will find a way to keep you in their world, no matter where you are. I've seen it. I've lived it. Not personally, but through the stories of many who opened their hearts to me. So maybe, just maybe, the answer isn't always to move closer, but to move deeper, into yourself, into your own life, into a kind of quiet freedom you might have forgotten was possible. And with that, I want to talk more deeply about what happens when we try to become part of a life that's already full, and how that affects not just our days, but our sense of who we are. There's a moment, often quiet and barely noticeable at first, when you begin to feel like a guest in your own child's life. And that's the moment I want to talk about now. Because that moment, however small, plants a seed. At first, it's just a passing feeling. You brush it off. But over time, that seed grows into a quiet discomfort. You begin to ask yourself questions you didn't expect to ask at this age. Do they actually want me here? Am I intruding? Would it be easier for them if I weren't so close? And maybe you tell yourself you're overthinking it. But deep down, you know when something has shifted. You see, When we choose to live near our adult children, we often step into lives that are already tightly packed between work and parenting and bills and everything in between. We hope to be a gentle presence, a soft landing place. But we forget something essential. Every household has a rhythm. And no matter how well-intentioned we are, entering that rhythm changes it. Your child may welcome you with open arms, but the truth is, they're not the same person you raised. They have habits now, routines, unspoken rules of their household. And the closer you are, the more you see and feel the places where you no longer fit. It's not always obvious. It shows up in subtle ways. The way your daughter hesitates before inviting you over. The way your son looks at his watch during visits. The way the grandkids seem more interested in their screens than your stories. And so you start adjusting. You shrink yourself a little. You try to be easy. You remind yourself to stay out of the way. But here's the thing. At this stage of your life, you shouldn't have to feel like a burden. You shouldn't be tiptoeing around, measuring your presence like a teaspoon of sugar in someone else's recipe. You've lived too much life to be reduced to the role of an extra set of hands or an emergency babysitter. You carry decades of experience, wisdom, humor, love. And yet, when we move closer in hopes of becoming a deeper part of our children's lives, we sometimes end up feeling more like accessories. Handy, but not necessary. I once spoke to a woman named Lorraine who had moved across the country to be near her son. She sold the house she'd lived in for 32 years, left her garden, her book club, her church. Her heart was full of hope. But what she didn't expect was how different everything would feel once she got there. She told me this one moment that still sticks with me. She had offered to bring over soup one evening when her son's wife wasn't feeling well. Just a small gesture, something she would have done 100 times in the past. But when she arrived, there was hesitation in his eyes. He thanked her, but didn't invite her in. He said, "The kids are doing homework, and it's kind of chaotic right now." She stood there, soup in hand, pretending to understand. And she did to some extent. But something inside her shifted, not out of anger, but from the slow recognition that love, even deep love, doesn't always make room for closeness. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, a place she still hadn't fully unpacked, wondering if she'd made a mistake. Not because her son didn't care, but because he didn't have space for her in the way she'd imagined. And it's not about fault. It's about the reality that grown children live in a different chapter. And it's their chapter now. We are not the authors anymore. We're guests, invited in on occasion for a page or two. And that's okay if you go into it with eyes open. But when you uproot your life, your routines, your friends, your identity, to be near someone else's life, you run the risk of forgetting your own story. And there's something else too, something deeper. The unspoken expectation. The assumption that because you're nearby, you'll help. You'll drive the kids. You'll sit with them when they're sick. You'll pick up groceries. And again, we're happy to help. Many of us would do anything for our families. But help should be offered, not extracted. The line between love and obligation is a thin one, and it gets blurrier the closer we live. At first, you might feel proud to be needed. It gives purpose. But over time, if the appreciation isn't there, if the gestures aren't returned, you begin to feel used. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but used nonetheless. You start to realize that your presence is more functional than emotional. They don't call to chat. They call when they need something. They don't stop by just to see how you're doing. They swing by to drop off the kids. And slowly, that warm dream of closeness starts to cool. You are present, but invisible. That, to me, is one of the deepest hurts of this stage of life. To feel invisible, especially to those you love most. And yet, I've seen again and again how this happens. It doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from misalignment. From this idea that just because we're family, our lives should automatically mesh. But they don't. And they're not meant to. Adult children are living in the thick of it. We've already lived through those years, the rush, the demands, the noise. We've earned a different kind of life now, one with space and grace and room to breathe. But when we place ourselves right in the middle of their chaos, we end up carrying stress that doesn't belong to us anymore. And worse, we begin to shape our identity around their needs instead of our own joys. That's not aging with dignity. That's living as a shadow. Now, some people say, but isn't it selfish to want my own life? No, it's human. You spent decades putting others first. There's nothing selfish about wanting to wake up and know that your day belongs to you, that your time is yours, that your presence is valued, not expected. And I'll say something else. Something I've learned from listening to many older folks who've walked this road. Regret doesn't usually come from being too far away. It comes from giving up too much of yourself and realizing, too late, that it wasn't necessary. One woman told me she wished she had stayed in her little seaside town in Maine. Her children lived in the city, and she thought moving closer would bring them all together. But after 3 years of waiting on doorsteps, watching birthdays come and go, hearing, "Sorry, Mom, we're just swamped," she realized she'd left the very place that made her feel alive. For a promise that was never spoken, only hoped for. We all want to feel needed, but we also want to feel seen. And if you're constantly giving, constantly available, constantly bending to fit into someone else's schedule, who is seeing you? You deserve to be more than a convenience. You deserve friendships that are mutual, conversations that are real, mornings that start with quiet coffee and not a list of errands someone else has planned for you. And here's a hard truth, said with love. If your child only sees you as useful, then something has gone wrong in the relationship. It may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to recognize it. Because time is precious now, not in a fearful way, but in a way that demands we honor it. You don't get to go back and reclaim the years you spent waiting for someone else's attention. But you do get to decide how you'll spend the ones ahead. And maybe that means choosing to stay where you are, or returning to a place that feels like you, or simply drawing firmer boundaries, even if you live down the street. Because closeness is not measured in miles, it's measured in meaning. We are not just parents, not anymore. We are full people with a right to a full life. And as we keep exploring this idea, I want to talk more about what it means to reclaim that life. How to create real community, real joy, even when your children are nearby but not truly present. There's something powerful that happens when we stop waiting. Not angrily, not out of bitterness, just peacefully. When we stop waiting for the call that doesn't come. When we stop rearranging our days just in case they need us. When we stop holding our breath, hoping this week they'll have time to stop by. That quiet moment when we realize we can let go of that invisible leash we've tied to someone else's life. That moment is the beginning of coming back to yourself. You see, there's a story we often carry in our hearts. The story that tells us our best years are behind us. That now, in this later season of life, our role is simply to support others, to make room for the young, to shrink a little, speak less, take up less space, And for many, that story takes hold when we live near our adult children, because proximity can play tricks on the heart. You tell yourself you're just being helpful, but day by day, it becomes harder to tell where their needs end and yours begin. You wake up, and your day depends on whether they need something. You cancel plans because your daughter might ask for a hand. You start organizing your time around what might happen in their house instead of what is happening in yours. And the truth is, most of us were raised to believe that love means sacrifice. And for a long time, that made sense. When our children were small, that's exactly what love looked like. Late nights, tired mornings, empty wallets, full hearts. But now, they're grown and continuing to live in that mindset, especially when we live nearby, can quietly rob us of our joy. We begin to believe our time doesn't matter unless it's in service of someone else. But it does. And reclaiming that time doesn't mean turning away from your children. It means turning back toward yourself. Think about it. When was the last time you did something just for the pleasure of it? Not because it was useful, not because someone asked you to, not to fill the time, but because it filled you. That's not a luxury. That's a right. And it becomes even more important when we live close to our adult children, because the boundaries can blur so easily. It starts with a favor here, a quick errand there. Before long, you find yourself quietly slipping into the role of unpaid helper, part-time nanny, emergency driver. And the part that aches the most, no one says thank you. Not because they're ungrateful, but because they've gotten used to you being there. And let me tell you something that might be hard to hear, but I say it with deep care. When people get used to your sacrifices, they stop seeing them as sacrifices. They start seeing them as expectations. And that's when resentment begins to take root. Not loud, dramatic resentment, but a slow, quiet kind. The kind that builds over time. The kind that whispers to you in the evening while you eat dinner alone, thinking of all the times you changed your plans for people who couldn't be bothered to check in. The kind that makes you wonder, would they even notice if I stopped showing up? And that's the question, isn't it? So many of us, in this later chapter, are searching for something that feels hard to name. It's not just connection. It's not just purpose. It's being seen, being valued not for what we do, but for who we are. But you won't find that by making yourself smaller, or quieter, or endlessly available. You find that by building a life that reflects your own rhythm, not someone else's. I once met a man named Carl, 82 years old, who lived in a small town in Oregon. His son had asked him to move to Portland a few years earlier to be closer, especially since Carl's health had started to slow. And he did. He packed up his little house, said goodbye to his neighbors, and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near his son's home. He thought it would be a new chapter, but what it became was a waiting room. He waited for visits, waited for phone calls, waited for Sunday dinners that rarely happened. And one morning, after sitting alone for 3 hours on his son's front porch, no answer at the door, no returned call, Carl went home, sat down at his kitchen table, and said out loud, "I'm done waiting." He didn't say it with anger. He said it like a man who had finally realized the truth. That being near someone doesn't mean being with them. That waiting to be included isn't the same as being loved. So Carl started doing something radical. He stopped asking. He stopped offering. He stopped building his life around the hope of being invited in. Instead, he started going to the local library 3 days a week, not for books, but for the chess club he found there. He joined a community choir. He started volunteering at a local shelter, helping serve hot meals to people who had even less than he did. And slowly, his days filled with something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. He still saw his son from time to time, but he no longer depended on it to feel whole. And that changed everything. Not just for him, but for his son too, who began to see his father not as someone to manage or worry about, but as someone with a full life of his own. That shift matters. It matters more than we often admit. Because when we stop orbiting around our adult children's lives, we start becoming our own sun again. We attract people. We shine. We stop living in the shadow of someone else's plans and start creating our own days with intention, color, and joy. And here's something beautiful I've learned. When you reclaim your time, your energy, your self-respect, people notice. Not always right away, but they do. And more often than not, when you stop chasing closeness, it finds you in unexpected ways. A grandchild who asks to come visit you in your space, a neighbor who invites you over for tea, a local group where your name matters, not because of who you're related to, but because of who you are. But none of that can happen if you're always waiting by the phone, always rearranging your life around people who've already built theirs. There's no shame in wanting love, wanting connection, wanting to be needed. But there is strength in asking yourself whether you've been planting your heart in the wrong soil, and whether it's time to grow somewhere else. Living near your children might offer comfort. It might offer safety. But if it costs you your identity, your joy, your freedom, it might not be the gift you thought it was. You've spent a lifetime giving. And now you're allowed, no, invited to receive. To receive time that's your own. To receive respect for your boundaries. To receive love that is freely given, not pulled from obligation. To receive mornings filled with your own plans. To receive quiet that brings peace, not loneliness. This chapter is yours, and the sooner you claim it, the richer it becomes. I want to keep talking with you about what that life can look like. How to choose not just distance or closeness, but balance. Not just helping others, but helping yourself to joy again. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop trying to be someone's version of useful and start being your own version of whole. And maybe that word, whole, is the one we don't say often enough in this season of life. Because for so long, we've been parts of something else. Parts of a family, parts of a marriage, parts of a job, parts of a household constantly in motion. And while all those roles were meaningful, they also came with expectations, with patterns that shaped who we thought we had to be. But now the stage has shifted. The house may be quiet, the work is no longer urgent, the calendar is no longer full unless you fill it. And that's the blessing and the challenge of aging. We are asked to become whole again. But how can we do that if we're still living in the shadow of someone else's life? That's the quiet danger of living too close to our adult children. We may not notice it right away, but slowly, gently, without anyone meaning to, we begin to orbit them. We build our days around what they need. We wait to be invited. We hesitate to make our own plans in case there's change. And over time, our lives start to feel like a draft, unfinished, waiting on their edits. Now don't misunderstand me. Love between parents and adult children can be deep and beautiful. But it also must evolve. It cannot stay rooted in the dynamics of dependence. Because if it does, someone is always shrinking. And too often, that someone is you. And here's something else people don't often talk about. How being nearby can create pressure on your children too. It's not just you who begins to feel unsure of your place. Sometimes they do as well. They feel watched. They feel guilty for not including you more. Or they avoid you altogether. Not out of cruelty, but because your presence reminds them of a responsibility they're not ready or able to carry. It becomes a silent tug of war. You feel disappointed that they're distant, and they feel guilty for disappointing you. But no one says it out loud. Instead, there are strained smiles, polite visits, phone calls that end a little too soon. And everyone wonders what's gone wrong. What's gone wrong is this. When you give up your own life in the hope of being part of theirs, it changes the entire balance, and it rarely ends the way you imagined. So what does it look like to choose a different path? Let me tell you about May. She was 76 when her daughter invited her to move in. Yes, move into the house, a separate little suite with her own entrance, her own kitchen. It sounded perfect. No more stairs, close to the grandkids, and someone nearby if her health declined. But after 6 months, May felt like a ghost in her own home. She waited for them to knock. They never did. She offered to help. Her daughter always said she had it under control. She made dinner a few times a week, and no one sat down to eat it. The suite that once felt cozy now felt like exile. And one day, May did something bold. She packed up and moved to a senior living community, one that wasn't about waiting to decline, but about living fully. At first, her daughter was shocked, hurt even. "Wasn't it enough?" she asked. And May replied, softly but firmly, "I want more than enough. I want life." That's what it comes down to. Life. Not just existing near people you love, but actually living in a way that lights you up. With people who see you, places that nourish you, days that belong to you. And here's the part that surprises people. When May moved, her relationship with her daughter actually improved. Without the weight of unspoken expectations, they found their rhythm again. Their visits were intentional, their conversations deeper. The guilt was gone on both sides. Because sometimes, a little space gives love room to breathe. So I ask you, what does your life look like when no one else is shaping it? It's a question that can feel overwhelming at first, especially if you've spent years as someone's mother or wife or caregiver. But underneath those roles is still you. And you're still here, still capable, still deserving of wonder. Maybe for you, it starts with something small. Going to a local art class, even if you've never held a paintbrush. Walking a new path in the park just to see where it leads. Sitting in a cafe with a book you've always meant to read. Or saying no to something you don't want to do. Not with guilt, but with peace. Because that's what autonomy looks like. Not selfishness, not distance. Just peace. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You are not too old to change. You are not too late to grow. And you are certainly not meant to fade into the background of someone else's busy life. You've given enough. Now it's time to receive, to explore, to find joy that doesn't depend on whether someone stops by or remembers to call. And I'll say this too. Sometimes when you pull your energy back to yourself, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing people who are busy, and you start attracting people who see you. A neighbor you never really talked to becomes a friend. A volunteer group feels like family. A new town, or even just a new routine, becomes a kind of home you didn't know you were missing. All of that is possible, but not if you're still measuring your days by someone else's schedule. Not if you're still holding back, just in case they need you. Not if you're afraid to disappoint them by choosing yourself. You can love your children deeply and still not want to live around the corner. You can cherish your grandchildren and still not want to be the one they call every time school is out. You can be present without being on call. And more importantly, you can create a life that's rich with your kind of meaning, not just theirs. So maybe it's time to rethink what it really means to be close. Because maybe the best kind of closeness isn't about geography. Maybe it's about truth, about emotional honesty, about respect. Maybe it's about phone calls that matter, not doorstep visits done out of guilt. Maybe it's about choosing presence over pressure. And maybe, just maybe, the best thing you can do for your relationship with your children is to stop trying so hard to be part of their lives and start pouring everything you've got into making your own life beautiful again. Because love, real love, doesn't need to be micromanaged. It shows up, it finds you, it makes room. And when it doesn't, well, then you know it's time to make room for yourself. We've spent a lot of time together in this conversation. And if you're still here, it tells me something. That deep down, you felt some of what we've been talking about. Maybe you're in the thick of it right now, living a short walk from your son or daughter, wondering why the connection still feels so far away. Or maybe you're standing at a crossroads, trying to decide if uprooting your life for the sake of being close is really the answer. Wherever you are in this journey, I want to tell you this as plainly and gently as I can. You have a right to your own life. Not a leftover life, not a version that's edited to fit someone else's story. A full, vivid, independent life that still belongs to you. We've been taught that aging means shrinking, that as the candles on the cake increase, our place in the world should quietly recede, that we should make room for the younger generation and step aside. But I think that idea has done more harm than good. Because if there's anything I know with certainty, it's this. You do not disappear just because your children have grown. You are not a supporting character in their lives. You are the star of your own. And here's the truth a lot of people don't say out loud. Living near your adult children can sometimes feel like the final act of giving yourself away. You gave them your youth, your sleep, your strength, your best years. And now, without meaning to, you might find yourself giving them your peace, your solitude, even your joy. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can love your family and still protect your spirit. You can be supportive without becoming invisible. You can offer help without surrendering your freedom. And if something deep inside you is quietly saying, "This isn't working," I want you to listen to that voice. Not because it's bitter, but because it's wise. There's a version of your life still waiting for you. Maybe not the one you had before, but something new, something quieter, richer, more honest. Maybe it's in a town where nobody knows your history, and that's a relief. Maybe it's in a hobby you never had time for before. Maybe it's in friendships that have nothing to do with your last name or your family tree. Maybe it's in morning walks, or a book club, or a little kitchen filled with smells that belong only to your recipes. Or maybe it's just the feeling of waking up and knowing that this day, this one right here, is yours. Not penciled into someone else's calendar, not on hold in case the phone rings, yours. That's what we forget when we get older, that life doesn't stop offering beauty. We just stop reaching for it. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop chasing closeness and start choosing wholeness. So if you've been feeling overlooked, if you've been wondering why being nearby still feels lonely, if you've been folding your life into the corners of someone else's, I want to say this. Step back. not away from love, but toward yourself. Because when you begin to honor your own time, energy, and peace, something remarkable happens. The world starts to respond. You start attracting the kind of relationships that choose you, not out of habit or obligation, but because of who you are. And often, your children begin to see you differently too. Not as someone waiting on the sidelines, but as someone who is living. Someone who still dreams, creates, contributes. Someone who commands respect simply by choosing not to disappear. Now, maybe you're thinking, but if I pull away, won't they think I don't care? And I'll tell you this. If the only way someone knows you care is by how available you make yourself, then maybe it's time to redefine what love looks like in your life. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your joy to fit into someone else's busy schedule. Love means showing up in a way that's honest, steady, and true, without losing yourself in the process. And yes, love also means setting boundaries, saying no, saying not today, saying, I'm busy, doing something that fills me. That might be hard at first, especially if you've spent years being the one who drops everything when they call. But the most beautiful shift happens when you realize your time is just as valuable. Your peace is just as sacred. Your days matter, whether anyone else sees them or not. So here's what I want you to walk away with. You are not a burden. You are not disposable. You are not too old to matter. You are still growing, still learning, still discovering. Your life is not over. It's evolving. And while living near your children may have seemed like a gift or a solution or even a lifeline, it might not be the life you truly need. That's not failure. That's wisdom. It's wisdom to realize that comfort isn't always connection. It's wisdom to recognize that closeness doesn't always feel close. And it's wisdom to choose yourself, not because you've given up on others, but because you've remembered who you are. So if you need permission to make a different choice, to step back, to move on, to create space, this is it. Not from me, from yourself. Because you've earned a life that brings you peace. You've earned mornings that begin without guilt. You've earned a version of closeness that isn't dependent on proximity. You've earned the right to say, I love my children, but I won't disappear for them. And if this message finds you at the edge of a hard decision, let me say this clearly. You are not alone. There are thousands, millions of people just like you, asking the same quiet questions, feeling the same hidden aches, wondering the same thing. Is this really what I came here for? And the answer, dear friend, is no. You came here to live. So live, boldly, gently, joyfully, on your terms. And if someone, somewhere, asks why you made the choice to stop living near your children, you can smile and say, because I remembered who I am. And that, I think, is reason enough. If this video spoke to you in any way, I'd be honored to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your story, what you've learned, what you've let go of, what you've chosen for yourself. You never know who your words might help. And if you found even one sentence in this video that gave you a bit of peace or clarity, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep making content that speaks to the hearts of people like you. Wise, strong, still becoming. Above all, I wish you days that feel like yours. Mornings filled with meaning, evenings wrapped in calm, and a life that, no matter where it's lived, feels fully and beautifully your own. Take care of yourself. You matter more than you know.